The new Netflix show, Vikings Valhalla, envisions what might have happened if Harald Hardrada, one of the more interesting Vikings of the age, and soon to be covered on this channel, were best buddies with Norse explorer Leif Erikson and the lover of Leif's sister, Freydis Erik's daughter. In truth, Leif died when Harald was about 5 years old, and Freydis was roughly the same age as her brother, so the scenario is pure fantasy. Still, it makes for excellent storytelling. Valhalla is a spin-off of the History Channel series Vikings, whose 6 seasons took viewers from the first Viking raid of England when the Scandinavian seafarers attacked a monastery on the island of Lindisfarne in 793 CE into the early 9th century. If the goal of the first show was to tell a story about the creation of the Viking world, this new one portends the end of the era in 1066. Its name references Valhalla, a hall of slain warriors presided over by the god Odin in Norse mythology. Like Vikings, Valhalla is less a historical drama than a series ripped from the sagas, with the writers compressing characters, historical events, and narratives from a variety of sources and time periods to raise the stakes and keep the story moving. It worked for the first show, and it works for this one too. Endless historical details are wrong, but the series doesn't really pretend otherwise. More importantly, the best parts of Valhalla place the medieval Scandinavians in the global North Atlantic, a diverse, complicated, and interconnected network of cultures that contradicts the image of an isolated, all-white Viking world. The show's first season takes place in England and Norway in the early 11th century. At the time, Norway was technically united under one ruler, but infighting between petty kingdoms was common, and the realm was far from stable. Adding to these internal wars were incursions by the neighboring kingdom of Denmark, which seized intermittent control of Norway between 970 and 1035, relying on local nobles known as jarls to govern on its behalf. Small-scale religious conflict in the region was common, but full-out religious war was very rare. In England, meanwhile, Saxon kings wielded limited authority over the great nobles of the realm. Relations between the Saxons, regional powers, and the island's Danish residents, who'd settled in an area known as Danelaw amid waves of Danish invasions of England, were often uneasy. In Valhalla, the action begins with Harald leaving a goodbye party in England to meet his older brother Olaf and begin their campaign to reclaim the Norwegian crown from Danish king Canute. On that very same night, English King Ethelred the Unready orders large numbers of Danes in England murdered, an actual historical event known as the 1002 St. Brice's Day Massacre. The real attack was likely a response to Danish raids. The series, however, suggests that Ethelred is trying to ethnically cleanse the island. In response to the massacre, the show's version of Canute gathers a combined Norwegian-Danish invasion force. Harald temporarily puts aside his differences with Canute to join the Danish king's army and avenge the killings. However, Canute's father, Forkbeard, was the one who actually retaliated by invading England in 1003. Canute only came to power after Forkbeard's death in 1014, and Harald wasn't even born until 1015. Again, Valhalla compresses the past to present a plausible dramatic sequence of events. As viewers can easily predict, Canute is the Viking who will one day build a great northern empire. Olaf will be killed and later canonized, paving the way for his brother Harald to take the crown. Into this mix, the writers insert a small boatload of Greenlanders, including Leif and Freydis. While Norway was very much part of the richly connected North Atlantic world, Greenland was remote even by Viking standards and played no real part in the political dramas of the era. The group comes to Norway, where Canute is amassing his army in search of revenge. After completing their mission, Leif joins Canute's army and befriends Harald, while Freydis decides to stay behind in the great Norwegian port city of Kattegat. However, this is an entirely fabricated story. Leif was born in Iceland, grew up in Greenland, and, according to the Viking sagas, accidentally found himself in Finland on the shores of North America sometime around the year 1000. Freydis appears in both accounts of the voyages of the Greenlanders, in each case joining a second expedition to North America after her brother's initial trip. In one saga, she orders the death of her rivals, personally massacring the women among them with an axe. In the other, she frightens off an attack from the indigenous inhabitants of the region by baring a breast and slapping it with the flat of a sword, while taunting her comrades' manhood for running away. If Valhalla plans to dramatize these two texts, known collectively as the Finland sagas, it will have to wait for future seasons, which will hopefully find Leif and Freydis heading west and Harald traveling to Constantinople and Sicily. The Leif-Harald invasion plot is typical Viking fare, with great battles, backstabbing, politicking, and sex. It's the Freydis in Kattegat storyline that accomplishes something new. The show features black actress Caroline Henderson as Jarl Hakon, the fictional pagan ruler of Kattegat. She is loosely inspired by the historical pagan ruler Hakon Sigurdsson. We know from DNA and such that the Vikings are travelers. They traveled to northern Africa, Asia, and all kinds of places. Obviously, they brought back slaves and knowledge, but they also fell in love. Most likely, people of color have always existed in the Viking community. It's amazing to bring that to Hakon's story because that's closer to the historical truth than what we've seen in Viking stories so far. In Valhalla, as Harald and Leif invade England, a religious war between Christians led by Olaf and pagans led by Hakon breaks out back in Scandinavia. Religious change in the region was a slow process, but the strict divisions highlighted in the show aren't wholly grounded in history. Mostly, faiths overlapped in a more or less easy coexistence, with gradual movement towards Christianization. But violence could break out, especially when rival claimants to a throne had different religious identities. The series tries to stage a Christian versus pagan holy war while recognizing the multifaceted nature of religious life at the time. Even Olaf, who seeks to become the Christian king of Norway by allying himself with Christian terrorists, makes it clear that he wants to maintain Kattegat as an open port city, a gateway to the world. Vikings Valhalla dabbles around the edges of some pretty big ideas about the Viking world. The show challenges simplistic, often white supremacist histories of the North as a purely white space. At the same time, it doesn't shy away from exploring the ways in which contact between different groups might just as well lead to hatred and othering as to tolerance and cultural change.